Hi, this is Mark Spencer from Ripple Training. This quick tutorial covers the calendar transition in the Ripple Timelines collection. Just a note, make sure that you check out the overall tips for all the Ripple Timelines, which can be found by clicking the Help button in Final Cut Pro 10 in the viewer once you've applied a transition. Okay, Ripple Timelines are located in the Transitions browser in Final Cut Pro 10. Ripple Timelines, the first one is the calendar transition. I'll just add that to a couple of clips. The default duration is 4 seconds. You can figure that out by selecting it and pressing Control D, and you'll see the duration. Often these will work even better if they're longer. I'm just going to make this a little longer, stretching out. And let's take a look at a few of the parameters that are specific to this calendar transition. Up in the Transition Inspector, as all transitions have, we have a set of quick tips that you can turn on to review some hints about how to use these. And then there are the different views, the camera view and the director view. For the camera view, we have a few ways of changing the framing. By default, it does a framing called look right. So if we play through the transition, we leave one clip, and we pull out, and we're looking right down the timeline to transition B, and we move into transition B. And we also have available 2 other drop zones there. There are a couple other framing options. Back up and look right. What that allows you to do is back up to see these other 2 available drop zones. So if I play that through, the camera backs up to reveal a full timeline before coming back into transition B. The other framing option is reveal to full timeline. In that case, the camera pulls back to reveal the full timeline. Just like that. Now, of course, each of these are adjustable, and you'll want to adjust them if you've changed where transition A and B occur. So let's go ahead and look at that now. If we go to the director view, what's unique about this particular template is that it has 4 separate drop zones in addition to transition A and B. In director view, we can see the name of each of those drop zones and the transitions, so it's clear what you're working with. There are yellow guides that help to line things up, and then on-screen controls for moving things. So for example, let's say we really wanted transition A and B to be the first 2 instead of the middle 2. I can drag A over to where the first one is. I'll drag this drop zone 1 over, and I'll use the guides to line it up. And then I'll drag B over, and I'll move drop zone 2 over here. And very easy to do with these on-screen controls. So the controls along the bottom, you can see you can move them up and down as much as you want. It doesn't change anything. It's moving them left to right that matters. And then there are also on-screen controls to move the drop zone independent of the stem here. So if you wanted to move the whole drop zone somewhere else, you can certainly do that. Or move the whole transition somewhere else. I'm just pressing Command-Z to undo. You can really put these anywhere you want. Normally you'll keep them where they are, but if you're adding a graphic, you may want to change its position. And I would check out the other overall hints under the Help button for information on how to do that. So now that we've got this rearranged, while we're here, of course, we can change the text to say whatever we want. I'll put another date in. But once we've got that arranged, what I'm going to do is go back to the camera view. And now if we go back to the look right, you'll see that it's not going to work quite the same because the camera's moving back to the same spot it was before. But we've moved our transition A and transition B. So when we get to the middle of the transition, right here, we really want to see both of those. We can open up this adjust camera position and take a look both at X and Y. So X, we could move a little toward us, and Z, X, Y, and Z. I'll move back in Z to reveal more of the timeline, and then use X to kind of move it closer to us. And you have full flexibility in how to adjust the framing. And by the framing, I mean when the camera backs up, what does it frame? So now when the camera backs up, right at the middle of the transition, we see the full timeline in view. And if I play through that, we start on the very first item and we get to see it, and now we see where we're going to the next one. In this particular transition, you can also adjust the camera rotation. So if you wanted to change how the camera rotates when it backs up, you can have this timeline pointing kind of up in the air a little bit like that. Or you could rotate it on another dimension, on Y, and have it be more face flat on than on an angle. And you can even rotate it in Z, although generally that might not be what you want, but you could sort of have an up angled thing like this. So you really have a lot of flexibility in kind of how this framing unfolds as the camera pulls back. So maybe I'll do something like that, and we've got a completely different kind of look. Okay, so the other things that you can do with this guy is you can change the color of the timeline itself to any color that you want. You can change the color of the stems that rise up from the timeline. If we want them to match, I can just drag one color swatch to another to have them match. And then the text color you can change to anything that you want. The text size changes the size of all the labels, the text labels at once, all the dates here. And then you can change the color of the frames that are around the outside of each of these drop zones and transitions. And you can turn the frames off if you don't want them. One reason you may want to turn the frames off is if you're using graphics with transparency and want to see the graphic without any background, you can turn the frames off. For the background itself, it has a solid color by default, but like most of these, you can choose either a gradient, and then you can adjust the gradient with a gradient editor, or you can choose a drop zone. If you do use a drop zone for the background, and I'll just grab anything here, I'm not going to necessarily grab something that's appropriate to this context, but I'll just grab something for a background, select the drop zone well for the background, add it in. Once you've applied a background and you reselect the transition, you can also blur that background so it doesn't compete too much with the rest of the image. So you can blur that out as much as you want. The floor you can modify. Right now it's a gradient that's pure white, but you can modify that by changing the tags on it. And you can, of course, add more color tags and change them to anything you want to adjust how the floor looks. Not only can you add and move those tags, you can change the location of the starting and ending points to basically rotate around the gradient in really any position that you want to create a gradient, kind of a floor, reflective floor that has a gradient applied to it. You can change the fonts of each of the labels here. You can change the font type independently, the actual font that you use independently for each one, or you can change them all to match, but you can change them. They don't have to match each other. And you can, of course, move this text around anywhere you want. It doesn't have to be where it is on the screen here, but can be really wherever you want to place it. Then the rest of the controls are simply for adding content to the drop zones and adjusting that content in the drop zones through panning and scaling, and then changing the font for each of these drop zones as well, which is covered in detail in the other tutorials. So those are the things that are unique to this particular transition called Calendar.